What's up? I don't know what to play.
Well, what are you in the mood for?
I was thinking like Sonic Adventure, but those games aren't on Switch yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, I might have just the game for you. What?
Ah, why? Ah. Oh.
You know, Sonic Adventure 2 was just one of those games that I instantly knew I liked. The way that you moved in that game just spoke to me in a way that no other game had at the time, and it turns out that I was not the only person who that game spoke to. As the years have gone on, lots of indie developers have sought to go out and recreate the feeling that Sonic Adventure gave to its players. But out of all of the indie games that try to emulate the Sonic Adventure formula, the one that stands out to me is Fepard Games' masterpiece, Spark the Electric Jester 3. Hey guys, Wario style, and let's get right into it. Spark the Electric Jester 3 opens up with a cart chase, but it's immediately followed up by the first level. This level starts out with a boost pad that gives players a taste of what going fast in this game feels like. The rest of the first world follows suit, showing players that this game is all about high-speed platforming with a little bit of exploration thrown in for good measure. Once you start playing, it becomes obvious that this game's pace is relentless, but you're able to keep up pretty well with Spark's fine-tuned controls. It takes a second to get used to, but once you have it down, it's generally easy to fling Spark and get him to land where you want him to. It's not the best controlling platformer I've ever played, Mario Odyssey is still probably pretty unmatched to me, but it's very good, which is important in a game as fast as this one because control over a character can really make or break the entire experience.
You know, it's like I always say. If a game breaks its experience, then you might break your controller. I've never said that before in my life, I just came up with that on the spot, I don't know.
The moveset in this game is very, very similar to that of Sonic Adventure. For example, you have a Jester Dash, which attacks the enemy nearest to you exactly like how Sonic's homing attack works. You also have the Charged Jester Dash, which lets you charge up for a burst of speed, just like the Spin Dash from Sonic Adventure 2. In addition to all these moves, you also have a Stomp, an Air Dash, a Double Jump, and a Lightspeed Dash equivalent that are all very similar to the same things from Sonic Adventure. But don't worry too much, Spark's moveset is not completely unoriginal. Some of his original moves are actually some of my favorites. For example, Spark has a Wall Walk, which lets you cling onto almost any wall and run across it. I mean, look at it. How can this not be fun? You're just literally running across a wall. You can't just keep running on a wall forever though, as you'll eventually start to slip off. When this happens, you either have to get off of the wall or jump to another one, creating a combo. This move is great for making shortcuts and for fun high-stakes sequences. It is also easy and fun to use, which makes it a great way to get around. Another one of Spark's original moves is his Jester Shot, which is a ranged attack that can kill some enemies that the Jester Dash can't. He also has a Rail Boost that lets you spend some energy to go faster while rail grinding. Rail grinding in this game is mostly automatic, but you can crouch while going downhill in order to gain some speed. This change is small, but it does help to make rail grinding more engaging than in games where it is fully automatic. That being said, the pretty good rail grinding does not excuse the overuse of the mechanic. It's very easy to get tired of rail grinding when all the level Lost Rivera is rail grinding. It gives me war flashbacks. The rest of the level design in this game is pretty good. The levels are split into several types, the main being standard, get to the goal style levels. These levels have a really good sense of momentum and flow, and they offer plenty of set pieces in which to use your gained speed. There are always lots of slopes to jump off of, tight turns to make, and cool maneuvers you can pull off just to make yourself feel good whenever you get into that groove. It is important to note that the levels also offer plenty of opportunities in which to get your speed going, which is important because getting your speed going is a big part of what makes this game fun. You can always run downhill to gain speed, but you can also use boost pads, springs, dash chains, and while running to help get your level times down. All the level design decisions in this game are actually made more impressive when you start to realize how big the levels in this game are. Every level is huge, and they all have a ton of hidden collectibles for you to try and find. The levels even have separate rankings for speed, score, and exploration, so you can choose whether or not you want to grind out combat, collectibles, or time trials. I think this is a great choice because you're never forced to do any tasks that you don't want to. The only exception to this is the final level, which we'll get to later. Other than the standard get-to-the-goal levels, Spark 3 also features several types of other levels. The first of these is the timed levels. They're shorter than the other levels, and they generally have to be beaten in a certain amount of time or you lose and you have to restart. These levels tend to have no collectibles so that you can focus purely on their speed. They're the most similar levels to the main ones, and they're still linear, so you have to platform your way to get to a goal. Another type of level that this game throws at you is exploration levels. These are also timed, but instead of being get to the goal style, you need to search around and find a certain number of special collectibles. These levels are non-linear open sandboxes that are reminiscent of mini Sonic Frontiers zones. Unlike the standard levels, which are great but can contain some beginner's traps and can be a little frustrating on the first run, these exploration stages are best the first time you play through them. The search for medals can be fun, but it loses a lot of its appeal when you already know where the medals are, so the exploration levels can lack replay value. Changing up things a little bit, we have one of the most different types of levels in Spark 3, which is the vehicle levels. These levels are all very different from each other, but they each involve Spark operating a different kind of vehicle that controls very different from all of the other vehicles and the main gameplay. The first vehicle is the car, which is actually how the game opens up, though it does return later. The controls are fairly standard, and it's overall pretty good, but it does have the occasional moment of jank. The other vehicle is a plane, helicopter, drone thing that I actually do enjoy using quite a bit. Not only is it in one of my favorite areas in the game, but the fast, frantic shooting fits in well with the rest of the gameplay while keeping you on your toes. It's definitely my favorite vehicle out of the two. The final level type that this game throws at you is the combat levels, which, who could have guessed, focus on this game's combat systems. The game's combat is not only featured in the combat levels, but it also makes appearances in the main levels as well as some of the other alternate level types.
Honestly, the thing that combat in this game reminds me the most of is your fight that you're going to have with the subscribe button below this video.
The combat in this game is fairly simple. Spark has a light attack and a heavy attack that can be used in specific orders to create combos, and he has a guard that can be perfectly timed to create an opening for a flurry of attacks. The thing that really makes Spark 3's combat stand out is the combo meter. Okay, so in the top left of the screen you can always see an orange bar. This is Spark's combo meter, and it always goes up when you attack an enemy. As your combo meter goes up, you start to deal more and more damage, and your kills start to be worth more and more points. You can keep using the same move for a bit, but after a while the meter will stop going up. This means that the optimal combat strategy is to constantly be attacking and changing up your combos so you can always keep your meter up. This combat system is simple but effective. It does a good job of staying fast-paced and engaging, and the game also features some smaller touches, such as separate combat and speed difficulty settings, that are much appreciated. In fact, my main problems with the game's combat doesn't actually stem from the combat itself, but instead from how the game utilizes it. Oftentimes, the game will put a forced combat section in the middle of a fast-paced level, and it really disrupts the flow of gameplay. The combat is also a little overused, and you can get sick of it after a while. Despite this, I would say that the combat is fun. The bosses are often an exciting back and forth, and I appreciate the combat much more in the dedicated levels where it doesn't obstruct the high-speed platforming. The problems in the combat just make me question if maybe the real combat was the friends we made along the way. Speaking of friends,
Segue.
one of the elements of this game that I don't think enough people talk about is the multiple playable characters. There are a bunch of them, and each of them have their own different abilities and combos. For example, the first character you can get is Float. Her jump has lower gravity, so she controls very floaty. This floatiness makes precision platforming easier, and it also makes long jumps possible, but Float's lack of gravity makes it harder to gain speed as her. She also has a sword that makes her combos and combat very different from Spark's. But Float is not the only other playable character. One of the other characters is the Electric Jester. He has a slow, sweeping attack that is great for dealing with crowds of enemies. Another one of the characters is this robot double guy named Fark. He's the main character from the last game, and he has an additional dash and power surge move. He's a great all-rounder, and he's a good alternative to playing as Spark. The final character is Sparks, who's a mix between Spark and Fark. He's the fastest character, and he has a slightly higher jump than Spark. He also has a version of Spark's Jester Shot. Honestly, Sparks is a little overpowered, but that's kind of the point of his character, and he's still fun to use. Overall, the characters in this game are fun to use, and they're a great way of adding replay value by shaking up the way you run through your levels. It's also cool that you can change characters through Spark's ability slots, which means you can change your character in the middle of a level. The only downside of this system is that in order to play as other characters than Spark, you have to give up one of Spark's extra abilities. Speaking of Spark's abilities, they can be bought at the shop, and they generally use up some of the energy that you gain through combat and gathering collectibles. And you use this energy to perform special moves. Some of these moves, like a burst of speed and a dash, help Spark to go faster, and some of the moves, like the power surge, are used to help Spark in combat. You have 4 slots available for these moves, and they're activated by pressing the correct direction on the D-pad.
This time I can't think of a transition to the next part of the video, so instead you get this.
Woo!
Okay, so the story in this game is interesting. So before I state my opinions, I feel like I should make it clear that I have not played the other Spark games, and I did not 100% this game, so I may have missed some story details. That being said, man, this story gets weird. Most of the story in this game is presented in flashback slideshows, and when actual cutscenes are present, they're not voice acted. This means that you have to read all of the game's story, and the story is not presented in chronological order. I at first thought that this would be cool because you can slowly figure out what's going on in the story, but what ended up happening is just me getting very, very confused. Due to all that, and out of fear of getting things wrong, I will not be presenting a plot synopsis for this game, but I will say that the plot involves Spark going out on a quest to stop the evil organization called the Fark Force, and meeting up with Float around the halfway point. The game also does feature a cliffhanger that leaves the door open for potential sequels. After beating the game, you may be surprised to see that you actually unlock another level. After beating that level, you unlock another one, and another one. You see, this game actually does something really cool. After beating Spark 3, you unlock all of the levels from Spark 2, excluding the boss fight levels. This means that you basically unlock a full game's worth of new levels after beating the game for the first time. The Spark 2 levels have less collectibles and they're smaller in scope, but they're still very fun to blaze through. In fact, I would say that at times, the smaller scope of the levels can make them better than some of the Spark 3 levels. If you decide to take on these levels, you won't regret it. All of that being said, despite the good things I've said about this game, it's far from perfect. The final level uses a live system that can force you to fully restart it, even though it's an hour long, and the game doesn't run the best on the Switch. It is also an indie game, so it has some bugs and production quality issues that is just not the fault of the developer. But even with some of these issues, I still feel comfortable recommending Spark 3 to fans of 3D platformers, and it's a must-play for Sonic Adventure fans. This game does have some lows, but it has some very high highs that outweigh the lows by quite a bit. I give Spark the Electric Jester 3 a 7 out of 10, Wario style, and I'll see you guys next time.